This is Adrian of HVDSA, and today we're tackling tariffs. What once was a concept that you may vaguely remember from your high school history class, tariffs have now become a hotly contested topic ever since Trump mentioned them on his campaign trail back in September of 2024. But the narrative has evolved over the past few months. Economists generally disapprove of them. Your uncle thinks it's just the art of the deal. And over the past few months, tariffs have been threatened, pulled back, threatened again, implemented, escalated, and currently, at the time of recording this, we are in the throes of a trade war with what originally was basically the whole world, but now is mainly just China. Let's cut through the noise. Tariffs can be defined as a tax imposed by the government on the importing of goods. That tax is paid upon importing, which basically means that the company, the importing company, is paying that tax, not the exporting country. So China, for example, is not paying anything. That was the first argument that Trump used to justify tariffs. He said, we're gonna make China pay. Fundamentally, that's just not what's happening. The importing company, let's say H&M, who's importing shirts from the global south, will be shouldering the cost of the tariff. But of course, that cost is gonna eat into the profit margins of H&M. So 9 times out of 10, that cost is passed on to the consumer. In other words, you're gonna immediately pay more for any goods that are tariffed. Which brings us to the second argument that Trump pivoted to. He said we're gonna bring back American manufacturing. Let's bring up that definition again. Import duties can be a form of regulation of foreign trade, which burdens foreign products and therefore encourages domestic industry. H&M, in our example, would be disincentivized to import because, well, that comes with the tariff. And then they'd be incentivized to produce domestically, right? Theoretically, yeah, but problem is that we currently don't have any sort of manufacturing base. This is the original intended purpose of a tariff. It's not necessarily to slap an entire country with a tariff, it's to protect specific domestic industries. So historically, you would tariff cars, steel, lumber, all selectively. But that protectionism only works if you have something to protect. You gotta have a manufacturing base to work with. Only we don't have that. And we haven't had that for decades. Manufacturing's been gutted, jobs have been offshored, unions have been eroded, and all for the purposes of companies profiting more, which has been squeezing the working class, likely you, for decades on decades on decades. And so tariffs sound great to many people because they come with that promise of bringing these jobs back. The idea being that these companies would now be incentivized to set up shop in the US to avoid paying the tariffs, which makes sense on the surface until you realize how costly relocation is from time and a money perspective. This isn't something that would just take a couple of months. Most companies that have even expressed interest in creating a US-based supply chain say that it would take years to accomplish. And even if production is finally brought back to the US, well, that's just gonna skyrocket the cost of goods anyway. I'm sure you've seen the headlines estimating what an American-made iPhone would cost. That's just one example. Our standard of wages simply can't support the production of cheap goods. Basically, tariffs will unilaterally increase the cost of goods on any product that shifts to being American-made. And in the meantime, any cheap good that you're used to getting from China or any other tariff country, well, they're gonna get more expensive anyway. So as a side note and a little bit of a warning, you should keep your eye on prices in the coming weeks and the coming months, as things might be getting a lot more expensive. Maybe spend less, maybe save more, maybe shop more frugally. Now, when it comes to global trade, the MAGA narrative is that the US is actively being screwed over. Despite what Trump may say, it's actually the complete opposite. The truth is that we actively screw over the global south, and we've been doing it for decades. Our lifestyle is already subsidized by workers in developing nations who make our goods for pennies on the dollar of what we would make to produce that same good. So if you think the working class here in the US has been squeezed, and it has been, the people in developing nations, well, they've been exploited way worse, like I said before, for the purposes of profit. That's profit that most Americans don't feel in their pockets, because as we know, that wealth tends to concentrate up at the top in a select few people. So the truth is that China's not ripping you off, X, Y, or Z nation is not screwing us over. The source of the problem is internal. Capital owning class actively leeches off of you, off of me, off of the global south, basically anyone who's not also part of that capital owning class. And slapping on a tariff, it's not gonna magically fix that. Now, if this resonated with you and you're excited about helping to build a working class movement, you should join Huron Valley DSA. And if you're not in our area, make sure to look into your own local DSA chapter to get involved. Also, share this video with your personal circle. The more that we can educate people on topics like tariffs, the closer we can get to building a mass movement of working class Americans who understand their collective power over the capitalist class. For now, I'm Adrian of HVDSA, signing off.